Okay, so now we're going to tie all of these schedules together into either our cash budget or our balance sheet and income statement. So I'm going to work on the cash budget right now. So the first step is trying to figure out how much cash you have at the beginning of April. So that would be, if I had a balance sheet from March 31st, I'd be able to take it from there, or they'll have to tell us. So let's just go over to the question and see what they say. So Royal maintains a 16% open line of credit for $75,000, and we always want to have at least $30,000 in our bank account. So that's just kind of our safety net. So if we do our cash budget and we find out that we don't have $30,000 in the bank account, then we'll actually borrow against the line of credit. That's all it's saying. Then it's trying to tell us when we're actually repaying our loans and when we're paying the interest. So it just says on the first day of the month, and then we repay the loan on the last day of the month. And we're anticipating that we're going to pay a dividend on $49,000 in April, and then we're going to do some purchasing of capital assets, so in May and in June. And then also here's our cash balance. So that's the amount that I'm looking for. There's also other questions that have additional cash outlays that we haven't caught on any of these schedules that are kind of just one-time payments. So also look out for those as well. So I'm starting out with $40,000. Okay, so now I'm going to add my cash collections. So that's from my collection schedule. So if you just go equals, go all the way up to your second schedule. I want to pick up the 170, the 400, and the 335. So now we can just drag that across. So I still have to put these amounts in, but I'll do that later once I start working to the end of April. So these are my total cash available, but I will put in the formula. So I'm just going to add these two together. So whatever you have in your bank account at the beginning of the period, and then whatever you've collected will give us what we have available. And again, just for the quarter, I want to take that 40,000 because that's how much cash you had at the beginning of the quarter, which is April 1st. So I still have to fill those two in, but I don't know the answers to that yet. Now I'm going to subtract out all of my disbursements. So the first one that I took was my materials. And let's just scroll up to our materials budget. So this is how much I purchased, but then this is how much that I actually spent. So I'm going to take it from my expected cash disbursements budget. So I'm going to transfer down the 40, the 72,300, and the 72,700. And then the next one was my direct labor. So I'm just going through my product costs right now. And so I'll go back up to my direct labor budget. Let's see here. So 15, 23, and 15. So I want those numbers. And I'm just assuming that the labor that I paid is the same labor that we accrued. So there might be a timing difference between when the payroll happens and the end of the month, but we're just saying that it's not significant or material. Okay, and then I'm going to take my manufacturing overhead. So remember, when I backed out the non-cash items, I want that amount with that backed out. So I've gone to the manufacturing overhead schedule and I've clicked on the 56, the 76, and the 59. And now I'm going to grab my selling and admin. So I've got the 70, the 85, and the 75. And so I just linked it, if you didn't see me, I just linked it to the schedule above. And remember, I want the amount after we back out the non-cash items, because this is my cash budget. I just want to know cash coming into my bank account and cash coming out of my bank account. And now I'm just going to consider those one-time costs. So I had my equipment purchase. So this is what I read earlier. So in May I had $143,700, and then in June I had $48,300. So I just put those amounts in. And I'm highlighting that in yellow because you'll just have to put those directly onto your budget. And then I just added those two together. And then with my dividends, I'm paying them in April. That's what the question told me that I read earlier. And I'll just leave an extra line just because if you move to another question, you most likely will probably have income tax payments. So I'll just leave the extra line so then when we do our formula, we won't have to redo the formula again. So then here's my total disbursements. So let's add them all up. So I added from materials all the way down, including that blank line in case I want to fill it in with something later. And then let's just drag that total across. So here's where I'm going to have cash in out. Technically, they call it excess or deficiency of cash available over disbursements, but that's a bit of a mouthful. So all I'm really trying to figure out is here's the cash in minus here's the cash out. So in this case, I have too much cash going out. So I'm at a balance of -20. And remember, I wanted to have at least +30, a balance of 30 in my account every month. So it looks like I'm going to have to borrow against my line of credit in April. I think at about 50. I think 50. We'll calculate that next. So let's just add a couple more items here. So financing, let's separate that between what I'm going to borrow and what I'm going to repay, and then also what my interest expense is going to be, or my interest payments. Okay, so I know that I need to borrow, let's just try this out. I said 50,000. So with total financing, if we add up the borrowing, the repayments, and the interest together, then that'll give me that subtotal. So maybe let's put a line right under here. So cash out is 20. Now I'm going to borrow and I thought 50. So now if I take the 20, so negative 20 plus 50, so those are the two subtotals, that gives me 30. So maybe let's just bold this one and bold this one. So I know some students are able to put if calculations together, but even for us at the end, we can just manually do this if the if statements are too hard. So that by borrowing 50, that'll give me a cash balance of 30,000, which is what I want. So now this ending cash now becomes the beginning balance for May. So let's just go equals and then select that. And now that we're up at May, let's just transfer that formula over as well for June. So then it'll update when we do June's as well. So my cash in is 430 and my cash out is 400. So that leaves me with 30,000 for May. So I don't actually want to borrow anything because I have the exact amount as a balance that I want. Remember, we want to have that 30,000. And now let's look at June. So I have 95,000 cash in for June. So I can actually repay all of my borrowings. Oops, I should probably put it in the repayment tab. So I can repay all of this 50,000. So if I do that, I still have 45,000 left. And now what I want to do is calculate the interest. So I'm assuming that I'm actually repaying the interest at the end of the quarter. And that's for 16%. So this can be tricky. In some questions, we might assume that we repay interest monthly or that we repay the interest and calculate it at the beginning of the month or the end of the month. So this is probably the area where most students get wrong just because we misunderstand the frequency of the interest. So I'm going to take my 50,000 and times that by 16% and then multiply that by 3 out of 12 months, because right now this is interest for a year, 8,000. So if I multiply it by April, May, June, that's outstanding for 3 out of 12 months. Then that gives me interest of 2, and we're paying the interest, so I'm going to put a minus in front of that. So I did 50,000 times 16% times 3 divided by 12. And maybe I'm going to highlight all of this stuff in yellow because on each budget that you do, you'll have to make these updates in order to make sure that you have the proper cash amount at the end. Okay, now let's add these up. So I'm just going to add each row across. So the total financing that I have left here is just the 2,000 because I borrowed it and I repaid it. And in some questions you might actually not been able to repay the full amount, but we have up to 75,000 that we can borrow against anyways. And then my ending cash balance, these two have to be the same. So I just copied the formula here and I moved it over. And so then you'll know that you have the quarter total done properly because those two will end up being the same. If not, then it's most likely the number here that we have to start out with, which is our beginning cash balance.